Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Infirmary, where either I talk with people about how to avoid pitfalls in endurance sports or sport in general. And today we are super lucky to have Brian Baxter here on the show. Brian Baxter has been working in sport and sports psychology for over 20 years. He worked at the Sports Psychology Institute Northwest as a consultant in 2007 before rising to director in 2011. Now he's the director and owner at Amplify Sports Psychology, where he works with athletes of all levels to hone the mental side of their game. Brian helps teams and athletes deal with pressure, improve focus and confidence, boost leadership and communication, all in service of better performance on game day. He's also the author of the Sports Mindset Game Plan, which you can order in the show notes. And he also built the Amplify Your Game Mental Training Program, which is an individual course that'll teach you the principles Brian's been using to help 2 decades worth of athletes. A lifelong soccer player, he also runs Baxter Sports summer training camps in Portland, helping a new generation of soccer players redefine their game. So I worked with Brian in 2015 after a few difficult seasons of racing, and I learned so much about a side of training that up until then I hadn't really thought about at all. Brian helped me set better goals and change the way that my brain worked in training and racing, resulting in some of the best performances of my career between 2015 and 2017. Mental skills is a huge part of every athlete's performance, and today we're going to help you understand what that is, what it looks like, and a few techniques you can use on your own to level up your mental game and, in turn, your overall performance. Brian, welcome to the infirmary.
Hey, Chris, good to see you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you here. But we're both soccer players at heart, and the English Premier League wrapped up a wild season yesterday with all sorts of chaos and last minute drama and things like that. This question could fall flat, but do you follow an English Premier League team? And in addition, did you see anything this season that made you think a particular team or athlete could have used some mental skills work?
I followed the season. I don't have a. I was a Man U fan for years and years.
Oh,
They're very hard to follow these days,
yeah, they're
however.
terrible.
But I do just enjoy the league and kind of following the players. I play a fantasy league with some friends and my kids. My kids and I watch games together. So um, just kind of watching the players and the highlights, and we'll catch a game, you know, once in a while on a Saturday morning. But yeah, I just love it. Love the all of it, the drama, the competitiveness, the ups and downs, who's hot, who's not, all that kind of thing.
Anything that you heard or stood out where you're like, ooh, that team feels like it could use like like some of the work that you do?
I think pretty much all of them. I know, I know that
Totally.
City had quite a year after Rodri went down,
Mhm.
and Pep is his own type of sports psychologist to begin with. So, and when Holland was kind of in and out of the lineup, I think that team definitely had as many ups and downs as you could. I think Chelsea, as usual, was their same, like could beat anyone on any given day and could lose to anyone
Mhm.
on any given day.
I'm already off script, but this question comes up all the time. Like
Okay.
when you're dealing with an athlete or a team that has that kind of like swinginess, that kind of inconsistency, where do you start?
Uh, I would start with the training and with the motivation, kind of
Mhm.
why, what is it that we're trying to do? I think a lot of times and in the Premier League, obviously winning is of the utmost importance. And so the majority of athletes that I'm working with are, I mean, some of them are professional, most of them are collegiate or high school, where winning's important, but development and playing at your best is of the utmost importance. And the kind of irony of it is that you're trying to win, but when you focus too much on winning or losing, it becomes harder sometimes.
Mhm.
And so what you want to do is focus on the things that get you to winning. So if a team is all inconsistent all over the place, I would come back to um, what is the actual goal? What are we trying to accomplish together? Because a lot of times the ups and downs are, player related, like the
Mhm.
example with City that I just talked about. So that's where I start usually is, are we fractured on our togetherness? Are we fractured on the goals that we've set and what we're trying to do as a team?
Mhm. Nice. Yeah. That kind of leads into the next one. I mean, mental skills is just, it's a very big tent. But what's a common misconception that you hear from athletes and coaches about mental skills and sports psychology?
Well, that's easy. The biggest one is that you have to be struggling or crazy, or there's something wrong with you to have to work with a mental performance coach.
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest myth, is that you only should come see one if you're just struggling and that's the last resort. You don't know what else to do.
Mhm.
And the reality is that it's for everybody. You could be playing really well, and what do you need to do to proactively keep it that way?
Mhm.
Or maybe you're playing pretty good, and is there anything you can add to your game? You can always add a new skill. You can get faster, stronger, etc. Well, why not be able to focus more or figure out, as you're growing as a person, you develop new skills and new skill sets and new ways of doing things, new experiences, and you'll also have new challenges, always things that you wouldn't expect. So, why not be working consistently and proactively with somebody to make sure your focus stays high and your confidence stays high.
You just used a word proactive that shows up on your website and in your material a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about mental training as being proactive instead of reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about
Mm-hmm.
what that means and maybe tell us a story about an athlete who really learned that and then put it to use in their training and their competitions?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the reactive side of mental skills training is kind of when you're in a slump, or your training has been going well, physically you're fit, that your skills are where they need to be, and you're still not getting the performance
Mhm.
that you would like. And then for oftentimes that's something mental is going on, whether something off the field um, is happening and you're having trouble dealing with it, or whether you're just um, in a rut. Maybe you're too hard on yourself, something like that.
Mhm.
And the reactive side is, okay, let's kind of fix the problem. Whereas the proactive side is, hey, you want to continue to push and to get better, we'll keep training. So it's not like you go to the gym and get to a certain max bench press and then you stop. Like, you have to continue to proactively get stronger, or maintain what you've gotten to. Otherwise, it just atrophies. And I think the same can be true with mental skills. Um, Kind of a good example that I can think of that is, um, and this wouldn't be one specific person, but a couple of baseball players that I've worked with who have come to me in that reactive period. They're in a slump. I don't know what's going on. I can't hit the ball. I'm getting in my own way. I'm getting in my own head. And so we'll work together on, changing their focus, relaxing a little bit, not pushing too hard, but kind of letting things come to them, and, setting goals in that way. And then they kind of start to loosen up, relax, and then they start to hit the ball again, and they start to get back into a kind of rhythm of where they're feeling comfortable, and they're hitting the ball again and playing how they would like.
Mhm.
And then we'll kind of, the work is done for now, and a couple months go by and they call back in the slump, or this thing happened, and I got this injury and I can't get out of it, or I've just fallen on hard times, getting a slump.
Mhm.
And then I ask, all right, well, have you been doing your pre-bat routine? Have you been doing your visualization that we talked about? Like, no, I haven't. I kind of forgot about it. And it's kind of like, I've done all these skills and I've mentally prepared myself to get back to the performance that I had done naturally up to that point.
Mhm.
And then I figured, oh, I'm here, I've arrived. And so I don't need to do anything. And I just can just go back to whatever. And then it's, the thing that got them to where they were, they stopped doing.
Mhm.
So the proactive side is continue to visualize, continue to set goals, continue to utilize your pre-performance routine and your breathing techniques and that kind of thing. And so that's where the proactive side really helps, is like, oh, I'm back.
Mhm.
But the goal is not to stay where you were, it's to get better.
Yeah.
So we've got to proactively work on like, so then my job is to talk to them and figure out, okay, what little tiny piece can we add that's going to make your performance better or your focus better and make you feel more relaxed, or it's in smaller and smaller increments, the better that the better you get.
It is something that happens a lot when you work with an athlete. I mean, I know that this was my experience, and I think that a lot of people, not even athletes, struggle with this, that with like mental skills work, there's this misconception that you just have to like read it or think about it once and then you know it and it's done. But in fact, it's a lot more like lifting a weight or, doing your training. Like it's a daily maintenance kind of thing. Like, is that something that you have to work with people to get them to understand?
Yes, yes, it definitely is. It's you know I have to try to teach people also how the human mind works. Like the actual psychology of people
Mhm.
is a little more complex than we give credit for. Um, it's like, like a parent that's like, "Hey, I told my kid to take out the trash, and then he forgot and didn't do it."
Mhm.
Well, okay, well, there's no motivation for that kid to take out the trash. He doesn't care, right? So like, um, so the way that the mind works is like you have to find that motivation, and you have to find there's deeper kind of patterning.
Mhm.
For athletes, I find that um, what I'm trying to do in the mental skills is change somebody's behavior and change kind of the automatic way that they do things,
Mhm.
because so much of human behavior is based on habits and patterns. Um, our we don't think our way through every little thing in life, or else our brain will just fry out and be
Yeah.
done, right? I use the example of tying your shoe. When you're a little kid, you can't tie your shoe. It's frustrating. You learn how to, but you eventually learn how to do it. And then there's a point where you don't think about it. You can tie your shoe and be talking to somebody, or be, watching TV, and you don't necessarily think your way through every single step. Um, and so if I am, if I'm a runner and I step up to the starting line to get ready for a race, and my mind's all over the place, and my thoughts are racing, and my stomach and my heart's pounding, and my stomach feels all queasy. Um, that's based on what you're thinking about leading up
Mhm.
to it. So it's like we got to back up and change the patterns of, okay, how do I prepare? How do I think so that it becomes automatic?
Mhm.
So we're trying to do this kind of behavior change, and it really just takes a little bit of understanding of how the brain works, how psychology works, how your nervous system works in conjunction with your thinking. And I find most people don't think of that at all. And that's, I think, what you were referring to in the beginning when you said, when you started working with me, you didn't really think about it. It's like these are the things that we kind of take for granted. It's like, oh, if I read this thing, I'll just remember it and then do it. Well, that's
Mhm.
just not realistic in a lot of cases.
Nice. So, like I just said, mental skills is this big tent. And one of my experiences coming in, just like you said, is like I didn't even know what the different buckets were to think about. So, like, what are the different aspects of, if mental skills is the big umbrella, can you tell me and tell the audience a little bit, like, what are the different buckets that you work in?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of them, but if I could really just distill them down to the easiest level, it's something a friend of mine taught me one time. He called it the performance formula.
Hmm.
And so the performance formula being thoughts plus emotions plus physiology equals performance.
Hmm.
So what I'm thinking, how I'm thinking about things, what I'm feeling and how I'm feeling about things, and then my physiological response to all that, how my body is working, that those three things add up, those three buckets add up to my performance. So if I performed really, really well, I can look back and say, physiologically, I was, strong, fit, whatever. Emotionally, I was confident and driven, and mentally, I was clear. Wasn't thinking that much, or I was just thinking positive things. And if you have a poor performance, one or more of those buckets, something is off.
Hmm.
And as I began teaching that to athletes as just a way to make them understand, I started to recognize how much it was more of a flow that started at the thoughts. So what I'm thinking about, so let's say I have a big race coming up, I have a big game coming up. The way that I think about what's going to happen creates an emotional response in me.
Mhm.
So I could either be excited, I could be nervous, I could be scared, I could be, happy, sad, optimistic, pessimistic, what have you. And that's all, like the way that I'm feeling is based on my thought processes. Well, what exactly am I focused on about the game?
Mhm.
Um, and then the emotional states, every emotional state we have has a physiological component or like outlet to it. So if I get scared, I like tense up. If I am relaxed, I lay back a little bit. If I'm happy, I laugh. If I'm sad, I cry. There's like a physiological response to everything. So then you distill it really, really simply. It's like, okay, if I've got a race, I got to run a mile. The way my body is working is that really is all of the performance is. Um, if I've in my best moments, my best race, I asked people what they were thinking about, and they're like, nothing. I wasn't thinking. I was just doing.
Yeah.
And so, and what that kind of means to me is like, I'm kind of full of confidence. I think I can do it. I'm present in the moment. My body is just going to respond to how it's trained.
Mhm.
So that gets back to the patterns that we're talking about. These patterns, when we're training, we are um, training through muscle memory and encoding in our central nervous system what to do. Um, so the way that I'm thinking, that's the first bucket that I look at is: am I thinking about positive things? Am I thinking about negative things? Am I
Mhm.
thinking too far in the future? Am I thinking in the present? Am I thinking about myself or my opponent? Am I thinking about the conditions and how bad that is for me, or am I thinking about the conditions and what I can do to counteract those conditions?
Mhm.
Um, so that the way that I'm thinking about all those things creates an emotional response in me. And most athletes would like to be confident, determined, aggressive, driven, happy, joyful, exuberant. You want to have that condition, and thinking about those emotions, your body is going to be pumped up and ready and able to withstand pain and these kind of things. If the thoughts are a little more negative, like, oh, what if I lose? If you're more on the negative thing, then you get this nervousness, you get a little bit over anxious, maybe you get scared or pessimistic, and that's going to have an impact on your physiological responses.
Mhm.
Muscle tension, heart rate, breathing too fast, breathing gets too shallow, um, and then your performance will be based on that. So the three buckets. So when I work with athletes, we're understanding our thoughts. That's kind of first and foremost.
Mhm.
And I'm talking to people about the brain and how it works and how it's based on patterns and how you're going to, whatever you've whatever you do to handle a situation, that's the same way you're going to handle it next time,
Mhm.
and then next time and the next time. And if that works for you, keep doing it. And if it doesn't, let's change the thinking so you handle situations differently. You have a different like habit or pattern to work with. Um, so then we work on the emotional side of things. Um, so a few different ways, like what emotional states do you want to achieve? And we maybe do some visualization and remember what it feels like to be in that emotional state.
Mhm.
And then we look at the emotional states that really cause performance to be, more negative, and figure out, okay, well, are we thinking about things in the wrong way, and how can we readjust that? Um, so we'll do some breathing techniques, visualization, emotional control, a couple different techniques that we use to manage emotions.
Mhm.
And then physiologically, um, you can improve your body language. You can stand tall and have better presence. You don't have to do anything else besides, that's not that's not something that just happens in a vacuum. You can make yourself stand up tall. You
Mhm.
can make yourself communicate in a positive way. You can make yourself smile. There's physiological things that you can do. Controlling your breathing is a huge part of sports psychology and the mental game.
Hmm.
So those are the three buckets, and every athlete is a little bit different. With okay, had athletes who most of us, a lot of people listening today can probably remember a time or know the feeling of butterflies in the stomach or feeling kind of queasy before a race, and this is really really common. I don't even think it's bad. I think it's just part of the game. Sometimes we'll have athletes that they are so queasy that they throw up before a performance, and so this is not a physiological problem.
Hmm.
It's an emotional problem, which is caused by a thought pattern problem.
Hmm.
Um, so those are the three. But so physiologically, again, breathing, visualization can help for the physiological part, and then just controlling your posture and your facial expressions and things like that.
We're kind of in this period in our contemporary society where emotions are act like emotional fluency and emotional maturity is kind of having a moment. In your work, do you find that you have to educate people about what emotions even are and how to feel them and how to access them?
I think sometimes, and it kind of depends on the age. Sometimes the high school athlete isn't as in tune with their emotions. Collegiate
Hmm.
athletes and professional athletes a little bit more. I think as you just mature and grow as a person, you understand them a little more.
Hmm.
But I think it's a lot of times they just don't realize, oh, I'm feeling that way, and they
Hmm.
haven't put a name on it. Sometimes just putting a name on that emotion is like, oh, well, I don't want to feel that way. Um, the I think for me the biggest emotion, the most important one, the one that comes up all the time, is anxiety.
Hmm.
And so that one we really dive into pretty deeply because it's a really it's a complicated emotion. Like you need some anxiety to perform at a high level.
Hmm.
Too much of it can kind of wreck you. Not enough of it can also wreck you. So it's like finding that right amount of anxiety is really crucial. And I think when I because anxiety sounds like a really negative term.
Hmm.
We've all experienced like a high level of anxiety, and there are anxiety disorders which I don't want to discount, but I think for the most part, the athletes that I work with don't have an anxiety disorder. It's just they experience anxiety, and it's not a very comfortable emotion to
Hmm.
experience. So I'm trying to help them see it as this is not a negative emotion. Let's look at it as a neutral.
Hmm.
So if we go through the performance formula, we're right in the middle. The emotion of anxiety, is that negative or positive? Is that anxiety turning into excitement or adrenaline, or is that anxiety turning into fear and worry?
Hmm.
Well, what's that based on? Let's go backwards in the formula. How am I thinking about this the event that's coming up?
Hmm.
Um, which also another very key point about anxiety is that's a future based emotion. So
Hmm.
we're not anxious about things that happened before because they're already done. We're only anxious about things that are coming up.
Hmm.
And for soccer players, you're anxious, 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 and the whistle blows and the ball gets kicked off, and the anxiety kind of disappears.
Yeah.
A lot of people have had that experience. Why? Because now I'm present in the thing.
Hmm.
Before leading up to it, I was looking ahead to something. So anxiety is this future based emotion that means um, you're uncertain about an outcome, and it also means you care, which
Hmm.
is another thing I like to try to really explain to athletes. Like, you're not anxious because something's wrong with you, you're anxious because you care. And if you didn't care, you wouldn't feel anxious. Do you want that? Like, no. Okay, so the more you care, the more you may, feel this experience of anxiety. So um, that's I think to answer your question, a lot of athletes I think they're in touch with their emotions, but again, there's this depth to it that they're not aware of, and they haven't really thought about before.
Hmm.
And sometimes just explaining like, oh, here's why you're feeling that way, and here's what that is. It's like, oh, because all this time I thought I was, messed up in the head and like something was wrong with me. It's like, no, all that's wrong with you is you care too much. Is that really a problem, or is that okay?
Yeah. One thing that you taught me that has stuck with me forever is that anxiety is simply something's going to happen. I don't know what. And, one way that I've tried to get athletes to kind of reframe it is sort of what you just said is like anxiety and excitement are very similar. Like excitement is also something's going to happen. We don't know what, but we sort of put a positive spin on excitement and a negative spin on anxiety, mostly because of, I don't know, just social habit and that kind of thing. Um, One thing that happens to endurance athletes that might be different than skill sport athletes is there's usually a period of resting before a big competition. And so an athlete that I work with right now is doing this big 200-mile bike race in Kansas on Saturday. They arrived today and
All right.
and they have a very, very easy week. Today is off. They've got some intervals tomorrow to just kind of pick things up, another off day on Thursday. It's a lot of sitting around time. What are some techniques or tactics that you would offer to somebody who is at their primary competition? And it's like the worst example of freezing the kicker. Instead of like two
Yeah.
extra minutes, you have like
All right.
5 days to think about kicking that field goal. What are some things that you could offer athletes to handle that anxiety?
Yeah, and it becomes, yeah, the longer you have to wait, it's just different.
Mhm.
The anxiety before a soccer game and the anxiety before a baseball game are different things because of how much time is in between. And then, like your example of a race where it's, they've got 5, 6 days to get ready for it. So what I would want to know from the athlete is when they when they are if they're feeling anxious in any time in the lead up, what is the anxiety centered around? Is it around, oh, I'm gonna like here's all the ways it could go wrong, or
Mhm.
I'm facing this, I don't like this type of course, or there's this particular, opponent that I have trouble with.
Mhm.
Um, I would want to know those kind of things. Well, where is it coming from? Right? That's the emotion of anxiety, the thought process, the thought pattern before it. What is it? And then we can kind of go through what we want to do then is say, instead of fearing what could happen that's bad,
Mhm.
go to that what's that thing that's bad, and what can I do about it now? What's the best thing I can do right then now in this moment that would help me with that?
Mhm.
So it might be extra rest, it might be training, it might be getting to the getting an ice bath, or doing working with your PT or something like that. Might be going to a movie, it might be something along those lines.
Mhm.
um, so it's basically like, as as I am thinking in the future and feeling anxious, how do I get myself present so the anxiety dissipates?
Mhm.
Um, I don't want it to disappear entirely because I want to get to the starting line and have this anxiety that's going to propel me to better performance. Um, Another thing that you can do is, okay, what's the issue that you're seeing in the future, and can you um, realistically say, I can solve that problem because, or I have enough intelligence, I have enough skill, I have enough dedication to overcome that problem should it happen.
Mhm.
Um, because I think if you're looking 5 days ahead and you can't do anything, you just can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, what if I solve that problem now? And so it's about finding solutions. It's about, what can I do now that will help? Um, and then maybe you do some visualization around that race. Like,
Mhm.
okay, here's how. If everything went great, I'll visualize myself doing this race, perfectly, exactly how I would like it to.
Mhm.
Um, so those are some things that's very tough. It kind of depends on the person, but it's like, go out with a friend, call your mom,
Mhm.
talk with your spouse or significant other or friend, or like find things to do that are not going to take away from your performance, but are that you can kind of take your mind off of it.
Yeah, it sounds like sort of healthy dissociation is kind of what you're saying.
Hmm.
Like, don't do something that's going to screw up your performance, but do some things that will address the performance positively, and then also just get away from it as much as you can.
Yeah. And it's getting away from it by being present in something else.
I
I
love
think
that.
that's, a real key, which is, um, you know, in order to perform at your best level possible, you need to be as present as you can, just like focused on that moment and that moment alone.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, you're anticipating things and looking ahead for in some ways, and you might be thinking back and trying to solve a problem or like fix something that you've done. But yeah, really, it's about being present, and there's a little bit of a kind of meditative quality to it, which is, if you've done meditation or studied it at all,
Mhm.
and when I suggest it to people, they're like, I can't do that. I can't meditate. Like I try and it just doesn't work. Like that's how it is. That's
Right.
how it is for everybody. Like it's a practice. And if you can be present for 15 seconds, that's meditation.
Mhm.
Um, and it's something that I do work with people on, not necessarily meditation, but visualization and breathing and just being able to focus your breath and be present for a minute at a time. It's like a practice in, oh, I can do that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that, it's so, I mean, I went through that with meditation, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like this is supposed to be doing something. Why doesn't it feel like I'm doing something?
Yeah,
Athletes we're so used to like I go and lift a weight or I like ride hard for X amount of minutes and
right.
the next time I can do it better. And so there's this feeling that meditation should result in something. But I think the thing
Right.
that changed my sense of it was like, no, I'm doing it right when I'm regularly getting distracted from the process and noticing it. And
Mhm.
that's really all that you're supposed to be doing if I'm correct.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. And so, with kind of breathing techniques and visualization is something you can do. So I have this thing coming up,
Mhm.
like you said, I have this event coming up, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. And that, I think a lot of athletes who are going to do triathlons and who are trying to play collegiate soccer and professional basketball, like they are incredibly, incredibly driven,
Mhm.
and they're like going to push and push and push and push and push. And so, um, they would probably be more anxious.
Mhm.
So what I want to do is help them to look ahead, but then also be present and find that presence. It's like, okay, I'm fine. I'm good now. I could like I'm on the right track
Mhm.
because it's all I can do. But these type of athletes, they're like perfectionists. They're like nothing is ever good enough,
Yeah.
which is awesome. It's what gets them there. So I'm actually kind of writing in my little blog now this series about being perfect in what I call the controllables, which you may remember the
Mhm.
controllables. So I teach athletes that you can control your effort, you can control your attitude, you can control how you prepare for things, and you can control what's happening in the now. So I
Mhm.
call that present moment. Um, what happens with kind of higher achieving and high level and high performing athletes is that they're trying to control everything.
Yeah.
Control this, control that. Like the future is coming, and I don't. Oh, this thing is going to happen, and I don't know what. They're like, it's frustrating because I can't do anything about it. So, um, the ability to point that perfectionism towards being present or preparing yourself is where a lot of the power lies.
Mhm.
Well, I can't control that, but I can control right now. Okay, I need to eat more. I need to rest. I need to do this. That is what's going to get me what I really want in the future, which is a good performance and hopefully, maybe a good result
Mhm.
from it.
It sounds like what you're talking about with being present and all of this stuff is, the mythical flow state, which has like
Yes.
kind of entered the sporting and just real world vocabulary so much that, like any term that becomes mainstream, um, there's a lot of shorthand and maybe soundbite that goes along with it. Could you just kind of talk about flow state for a little bit? You've already sort of nibbled around the
Mhm.
edges that it's about being present and whatnot, but what is it? And what are some of the ways that athletes can set themselves up to experience it more often?
Mhm. Yeah, flow state. Yeah, it's kind of an elusive thing. I think most athletes kind of have experienced it before. It's when everything seems easy and it's flowing and you're not really thinking about things and everything's going right for you and you have no doubts and it's just this experience of um, it's just this experience of not thinking
Yeah.
and of feeling and of flowing with the ins and outs of the universe. And so I try to explain it as there's no real, like, we don't know how to get there, otherwise somebody would have bottled it and maybe and making $1 trillion
Hmm.
on it. So it's, for me, it's about creating the conditions that will more likely get you into that
Hmm.
flow state. And so a lot of it does have to do with just being as present as you can. One way to look at the flow state is that i'm I'm experiencing the present moment, moment after moment after moment after moment after moment after moment after moment. um, and um, so some of the conditions being, you prepare yourself the best you can and try to remove distractions.
Hmm.
um, that you are, that you have some specific goals in mind, and then trust that you by the doing you will achieve that thing.
Hmm.
um, there's one way to look at the flow state is that you have, there's a cool chart, maybe I can get that sent to you, but
Sure.
on the x-axis is the skill level that you possess,
Hmm.
and on the y-axis is the challenge of the thing you're doing. So it's when your skill level matches the challenge, you're more likely to get into a flow state. Um, if the challenge maybe is even a little bit higher than your skill level, that's probably even better,
Hmm.
because you have to just trust. There's another thing about flow state, that's trust.
Hmm.
Trusting that a good thing is gonna come. Just if I focus and do this thing. Um, so if your skill set is too high and the challenge is too low, that's that's like boredom, or that's like being a kind of flat in an emotional state. If your skill level is too low and the challenge is too high, then that's like anxiety provoking, and that takes you out of the flow
Hmm.
in a way that's kind of frustrating, or anxiety provoking. Um, and then I kind of like to add to that. So that's the chart that I've seen. It's the skill and versus challenge.
Hmm.
And then I like to think, so from the sports psychology lens, it's the perceived skill and the perceived challenge. Because sometimes I get an athlete that they should be in the flow state because the challenge is right where their skill is, but their perceived skill or their perceived competency is lower than what it
Hmm.
actually is. Um, and then, I guess on occasion people think they're way better than they are, and they think they could do this challenge and they can't. That could also be super frustrating. So it's about, um, how do I find the right challenge that suits where I am or where I think I can go to? So there's a couple of things to think about with flow state.
So that athlete whose perceived skill level is lower than it actually is, how do you how do you fix that with that athlete? What's the approach of getting them to see that their skill level actually matches the challenge that they're trying to meet?
Mhm. That's a really good question. I've been working with an athlete before, recently, and he plays a couple sports in high school, and um, he's talking with his parent and him, and the parent's like, this player is, he's got great skills, and he's, this, that, and then we'll tell at the end of the game, we'll say good game, and he'll say, no, no, well, not really, like that was
Mm.
terrible. And I think we've all kind of experienced that at some point. Like, oh, mom, you're just saying that because you're my mom. Uh, and I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, well, my mom is not realistic. I was just being realistic. And so I look at it as like, okay, we do all these things well,
Mhm.
and then you do this thing poorly. And that's that one thing you did poorly out of the 10 things, you're now rating yourself as lower and your perceived skill level and ability level is lower. And I was like, well, is that realistic to judge yourself on one thing versus this whole of the things? And he's like, no, probably not really. I'm like, right. So and when you're an athlete, like, that's why we have coaches. That's why people come to see, people like you is like,
Mhm.
I need somebody that sees beyond what I can see about myself. Because, again, getting back to like a perfectionist or like most of the athletes I work with in college and high school are almost always like not only high achievers on the field and on the track and everything, but in the classroom too.
Mhm.
Um, so they're just constantly judging on like if I fall short, then I'm less than this. Like I got to get straight A's and and so they're really just they're seeing every little failure.
Mhm.
It's hard for them to see beyond like where they can go. Whereas a good coach, a parent can say like, oh, if you just did this, like, because I've been through it and I've seen people where you are who got to this level. Um, so that's one way is to just say, I don't know if you're really, really being honest. Um, one thing about confidence is that probably the biggest factor that makes somebody feel confidence is when they have success.
Mhm.
Because I'll ask people this question that's like, what makes you feel confident? And they'll say, well, when I hit a home run, when I score a goal, when I win a race. I'm like, okay, well, you're telling me you feel confident after you achieve something, but where did the confidence come from then to get there? It's like this chicken or egg thing. Like, well, where'd that come from?
Mhm.
So they sometimes can only see, well, I've only reached this level. So this level, they can't even conceptualize it sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, so another way that to help people that don't think they're as good is like I'll have them ask the coach and report back. I want the coach, to tell me all this list of things, and then the coach will tell me, and I'll be like, okay, so you're telling me this thing, and your coach is telling me this other thing. Who's actually right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's like they just don't want to like be braggers, and a lot of times there's this psychology where they're like, yeah, but if I say I'm good enough, then that'll make me lazy, or like that'll make me not feel like I have to work anymore. So like
Mhm.
kind of constantly putting themselves down as a way to like motivate themselves, which is I think it's kind of as much as I've heard it, it sounds pretty natural because I've heard people do it.
Mhm.
But this is that pattern and habit of mind when at a certain point, like that's going to work up until a certain point, and then it's going to have diminishing returns and it's going to become even negative for you.
Mhm.
So you have to so I help them to realize, hey, it's going to have to be different. You can't be constantly beating yourself up anymore.
Mhm.
You have to turn it in a way. I mean, be honest. Yeah, if you messed up, be honest with it, but also don't let that become everything. Like,
Yeah.
what do we do? What's the pattern of the pattern of thought and the habit of my own self talk has now got to change.
Mhm.
So that those are some ways that I help athletes in that way.
That makes that the second one really holds true for endurance sports. The endurance sport athlete, I've discovered over time that 50% of them like it and they really enjoy the sport and they're doing it because they enjoy it, they like it, all this other stuff. And then the other half, like a lot of the time, there's sort of like a self-punishment loop that
Yeah.
results in the attraction of endurance sports. It's uncomfortable, it's repetitive, like it's all of this stuff where, like you're saying, for the first little bit, that can be productive. It can be this place where it's like you're sort of working through those things. But then if you sort of hold on to endurance sports, like this is the place where I just sit in my negative emotions, eventually I imagine that that gets maladaptive. Of you're just like always in that place of like, well, I'm doing this to make up for perceived,
Mhm.
failing somewhere else. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, yeah, it really does. And it's, it's kind of fear and self-criticism is definitely a motivator. It's
Mhm.
definitely a fuel. It's just not sustainable for that long. I
Mhm.
mean, different people have different, you know, kind of time frames when that ceases to become helpful. Um, and so it's like, okay, now I got to learn how to be nice to myself and like encourage myself. Like that's scary to people,
Uh-huh.
but
It's
yeah.
It's so funny. It's scary to people, but I think to some degree, like, I think it's one of the reasons why we engage in sport in the first place. Maybe not even consciously, but like, it's this somewhat lower stakes place where we can face adversity and deal with it, and kind of learn to
Mm-hmm.
like ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes like that I think that gets lost along the way because we do begin to get focused on doing the sport, what does it get me, what comes out of it, all of that
Uh,
stuff. But yeah, I mean, I really think that part of it is that original impulse of like, I want to do something fun and hard, and that's probably going to help me like myself better.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you can get to a high level without a fair amount of self-criticism
Hmm.
and a fair amount of like, that's not good enough. I need to do better.
Hmm.
But there has to be I need to do better part. And I will do better. And I'll turn it into this training and I'll turn it into this, change. Um, because if there's not enough self-criticism, then you're just okay with mediocre results, and like that's fine
Hmm.
if you're just there to stay in shape and participate. Like there's no problem with that. But nobody who's in that boat comes to see me anyway. It's like the people who are beating themselves up, they care a whole lot.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, so that and you don't ever, I don't think, want to lose the some some like semblance of negative self-talk or self-criticism. There has to be a fuel to it.
Hmm.
um but if it's just like beating yourself up, 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 that's going to obviously take a toll.
Yeah.
I think it's a real slow transition from beat myself up, do something about it that's positive, feel good about myself,
Hmm.
do good for a while, beat myself up, beat myself up, beat myself up, do something different. Like I really got to hone in on my nutrition regimen.
Hmm.
If you get so mad at yourself for not doing well and you identify it's because my nutrition isn't good enough and you do something about it, well, that was good. Better than, well, I just didn't succeed because
Hmm.
whatever excuse. Um, but I think there's this slow but sure transition that becomes like beat myself up, beat myself up, beat myself up. I suck. I'm never going to be able to do it. I don't have it anymore. I can't do like what something's wrong with me. And there's not. It's just you didn't turn the switch over to the positive
Hmm.
thing. I have kind of a little, I don't know how good of an analogy it is, but it's like if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, it's beautiful and you want to get up as close to the edge as you can and you can see more and more. But if you take one step too far, you're like falling into a canyon and
Hmm.
injuring yourself and dying. So you want to find a way to like, how do you push yourself so hard up to the edge of the canyon where you don't push yourself in? Push yourself up and then back up. Okay, I got the view I needed. Now I can back up and
Hmm.
go paint my picture or whatever. So,
I think that one of the things that when we worked together that I found so incredibly valuable was the energy management side of things, which I think you're kind of getting to about the like getting up to the edge. And I know we're talking about self talk, but
yeah.
self talk is such a big part of energy management. And we've only got a few more minutes. I've got one more question after
Okay.
this, but like energy management, like for what is it? because this was one of those things that I was like, oh my gosh, I've never even thought of that, and it
Mhm.
really was incredibly helpful in terms of getting into a place where I could actually perform effectively. Could you talk a little bit about energy management, like what it is and how athletes can like actually move themselves up and down on that spectrum? Because I think this really goes into the flow state kind of thing and
Mhm.
is energy management. And
Mhm.
that was a concept that I had really no understanding of, that you yourself as an athlete could adjust your level of basically arousal. And like at the
Mhm.
top end of this, it's like, oh, being all the way up at the top is not necessarily great. um could you
Correct.
talk a little bit about energy management and how you work with an athlete to achieve their optimal level of energy for a competition or a workout?
Yeah. So we kind of look at the energy level as kind of tied to anxiety. So we had talked to anxiety about anxiety before, and
Mhm.
anxiety, to recap, being a future-based emotion where you're uncertain of the outcome, and it's not good or bad. It just is, and
Mhm.
what your thoughts, whether negative or positive, will kind of inform whether anxiety turns into like a nervousness and a stress level or an excitement level. And so the anxiety or energy level, uh, on a scale of 1 to 10, sometimes we think, hey, we want to be at a 10, a 10 max
Mhm.
out all the time. Um, but there's kind of, in theory, there's this optimal energy level to where you're performing at your highest.
Mhm.
And I know in an endurance type sport, there might be differences between the start of the race and certain segments within, and certainly at the end. Um, but the energy level, or energy or anxiety level, based on what you're thinking about, how you're feeling about things, um, you kind of, and I work with athletes on coming up with an optimal kind of energy level,
Mhm.
like on a scale of 1 to 10. And so if I'm a golfer, that energy level might be closer to a 2 or a 3. And if I'm a football player, it might be closer to a 9 or a 10.
Mhm.
Um, and so depending on your sport and where you're at, for a particular event, you would kind of come up with this number and then say like, okay, what are the when I get above that energy level, if I'm expending too much energy, if I'm too anxious, what does that look like, and
Mhm.
what happens? So it might be, and often cases it's overthinking, it's putting too much pressure on yourself, it's like trying to go harder when you maybe need to relax. And so you kind of identify those. What are the situations where I might become over anxious, or,
Mhm.
or over, just putting out too much energy? And then what solutions do I do to bring me back into the right energy level? Oftentimes that's self-talk, reminding yourself of what your goals are. It could be breathing techniques, um, those kind of things. And then on the other side of the spectrum is when you don't have enough energy.
Mhm.
It's kind of that, like, I'm bored, or I don't think I need to focus that much, right? This is where I can coast, kind of thing. And so, what are some things you can do to pick your energy level up in those moments?
Mhm.
That would again do with self talk. That could do with some visualization or mental imagery. Um, but that's kind of the concept that I work with athletes on. And again, everyone's a little bit different, but that's the broader concept.
Okay, final question.
Okay.
And so like, we're both coaches. I primarily work with physiology and stuff like that. And if somebody comes to me and they're like, I can't work with you, but like, what's the one thing that I could do to be a better endurance athlete? And my answer to them would be like, can you do this? Can you just go out and swim, bike, run, row, ski a little bit more often? I think that that's probably
Mhm.
what I would say is like, do the sport and enjoy the sport more.
Okay.
If you didn't have the bandwidth to do like a full work with a particular athlete,
Hmm.
what do you think is like the most important thing athletes can do to
Hmm.
improve their mental game?
Hmm. I think, first and foremost, this is kind of my answer for if I could teach one thing, is it would be the controllables,
Uh-huh.
which I talked about. So control the controllables, focus on them, know the concept, know what it is, and then know yourself. So the controllables, as I mentioned, were attitude, effort, preparation, present moment.
Mhm.
Um, the theory being, if you take care of those four things and you maximize that, you've got a great attitude, you're positive and you're resilient, and your work rate never drops. You've done everything you possibly could to prepare through nutrition and hydration and rest and all that kind of thing, and then you're present through the moment, giving yourself the best chance to get in a flow state. That gives you the best chance you possibly can to succeed and perform well. And then there's all these things that you can't control, which is the past, what happened before, what's going to happen in the future. You can't control your opponents or the course or the conditions. You can't control whether your the outcome by and large, um, and certain situations you can't control. So there's all these things that you can't control
Mhm.
that we try to control. Figure out for yourself, what do I spend a lot of mental energy on that's not in my control that would be better spent somewhere else? And then relentlessly make yourself not get mad at the referee's terrible calls, or not get mad at, or not curse the rain, like the course is too hilly or it's rainy or whatever. Like, take that as it is and say, okay, it's a hilly course and it's rainy, and whatever. How do I prepare the best? I'm going to prepare the best I can for that, and then that's going to help. Well, this referee is awful. Well, okay, the referee's calling the game way too tight. So I got to back off and not go in a million miles an hour. He's going to call every little time I touch a person. So I need to adjust my game.
Mhm.
If you are thinking about that referee, you're not thinking about all the reasons you can't succeed. That's, and you're going to get frustrated. But if you think, okay, I can change my game to fit the way the game is going, then you feel like you're in control.
Mhm.
And so confidence, by and large, is the feeling of, I got this. I
Mhm.
know I can do it. I got this. I'm in control. So confidence, control is like interlocked. So that's what I would say is the most important thing, and that is they almost every time I meet with an athlete, whether it's the first session or the 10th or the 20th, there's something that's out of their control that's throwing them off,
Mhm.
and those things change over time. So it's like, make that part of what you do is control the controllables, do the best I can to not try to control everything else.
Yeah, we're gonna move. We're gonna walk out of here in just a second and give you a chance to like tell people where they can find you. But I just want
Okay.
to. So that last part that you talked about, I think showed up for me in probably the last really good race that I had in 2017. It was World Championships. It was up in British Columbia, and I had a great swim, and I was in a bike pack with a bunch of athletes that like normally I would be like, I don't know if I should be in this bike pack with these athletes, but I was having a great day. I was having fun, and I got a penalty for littering. That is a rule in triathlon. If you ditch equipment or trash outside of an aid station, you're eligible for a 1 minute penalty. I was coming to an aid station through an empty bottle before we got to the aid station, and the bottle rolled into the aid station. It rolled into the trash collection area. Like, I feel like, hey, I actually did that really well. Hear a motorbike come up next to me. Referee shows me a yellow card. You have a 1 minute penalty at the next penalty tent. And, I think at earlier parts in my career, I would have lost it. And I just rode to the penalty tent and took my penalty. I was joking with the officials. I was like, the sunny attitude didn't go away. Like, I was just like, I'm having a
Mhm.
great race. This is 1 minute. Who cares? It was a 6 hour race. Like, I can
Yeah.
deal with a 1 minute penalty. Yes, I lost the bike pack. Might have even helped me eventually because, like, I was kind of punching above my weight, and maybe riding another like 40 kilometers with that group would have been too much. But that's one thing that I always remember. I was like, oh my God, Brian totally taught me this, to just be like, there's nothing I could have done in that situation. Like the referee's not going to take the penalty back, so it's like, well, just get on with it. Don't be an asshole at the penalty tent and get on with your work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how many stories are there where you're like, oh, this bad thing happened and that bad thing happened and I still made it. Like that's way better than everything was in my favor and I did
And I
it.
screwed
Like
it up. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this was awesome as always. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Where are the different places that people can find out about you and work with you?
The best place is amplifysportspsychology.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, although I'm not on there all that much. So the website is the best place to find me. My book is there. The online course, which is being revamped and should be ready by the end of the summer, full on. That'll be up there as well.
Well, again, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for the work that we've done together in the past. It has been hugely helpful to me as an athlete and a coach. And everybody listening, if you have a chance to work with Brian, I would heartily encourage you to go ahead and do it. So, Brian, thanks again for being here. I really
All
appreciate your
right.
time.
Always nice talking to you, Chris.